All Things Alyss. This podcast will explore the cultural phenomenon of Alice in Wonderland as artistic landmark and global symbol of inspiration and imagination. I'm your host, Frank Beddor, the author of the Looking Glass Wars trilogy. Let's explore, what is it about Alice? Welcome to the show, everybody. I met today's guest almost 10 years ago at a Christmas holiday party. We bonded right away over the novel East of Eden, as well as the movie, because who doesn't love James Dean's performance? Maybe one of the great young actors to ever grace the silver screen. And there was instant chemistry between us. We ended up spending a great deal of time talking together. We talked about everything, especially stories and story engines and conflict and characters and the joy of world building. She's been a staff writer on numerous television shows and recently has written a terrific pilot for ABC. Honestly, it would make a brilliant show. I hope it gets greenlit. We've been collaborating in a number of ways on the Looking Glass Wars, which we'll touch on today, but she's that person that I enjoy spending all of my time with. She's smarter than I am. She's better looking than I am. The one thing that I am good at is I know a good thing when I see it. So I asked her to marry me. She said yes, luckily. We got married in May, so I couldn't be happier to have her on the show as my partner in life, my creative soulmate, and she's certainly the most beautiful human on the planet as far as I'm concerned. So welcome to the show, Teresa Lin. Well, Teresa Beddor Lin now. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be on air. It's kind of interesting to be sitting across from you and have this sort of spatial and auditory distance when it feels like our collaboration has always come from this inside space where we're really deeply connected. And so,
well, I'll reach out and hold your hand if you get nervous. I can be an intimidating guest at times with very probing questions, but I think it's important that we start a little bit with your creative background. I mean, you can go back as far as you like, but I'm interested in the evolution from, a quick synopsis of your time in Taiwan to the States, to Duke, to USC Film School, to starting in the film business and in the television business, as you got your first one of your first jobs as a writer, a professional writer on the TV show Bones. And
well, one of the ways that I really like to contextualize how I came to story and storytelling has always been this imaginative space, this expanse, if you will, that I filled by because I had no access to television, and I was kind of a solo kid for a while, growing up in Taiwan with both parents working, and I was brought up really by the school teachers and the school principal and myself. Pretty independent when I was young. So I was given a set of art supplies and some books, and I was left to myself. So pretty much that expansive creativity and imagination and filling in started there. And I remember the very first film that I was taken to by my grandmother in this village of Jiayi, and she took me to Snow White, and it was, how far-reaching Disney was at the time, and still is, and shaping, what I remembered being, the magic of cinema, and also what the model of, what girls should grow up to be. And in a culture where, being in Taiwan, it was the Chinese culture where women were told and were taught, kids and girls especially were taught to be, quiet and subservient, and it just really the quiet and small spaces that I had to fill, I did with my imagination and with these stories. So when I came to Florida, to America, we started. We bought into a motel where we worked and lived, and that was sort of our next stage of my sort of bird's eye view into American culture. And I was quite enamored with what America stood for, and then quite startled by the reality of what it looked like and felt like living in a motel next door to this Baxter's Lounge, which was a transvestite bar in a not so great part of Tampa, Florida. So I think again, the discrepancy between what was imagined and what was sold to me and what the reality was fed, further gave me fodder for creating stories. And then all the life experiences I had growing up, between my parents giving me this cultural background of, what it means to be Chinese and Taiwanese, and keeping to the ethics and the standards of high education, and education being number one and the number one driving force in my life, and understanding and that if I were educated, then that would be my ticket up in society. And that gave me, a tremendous work ethic, and it landed me at Duke and then at USC film. But all this time, people are always surprised when I tell them that, I didn't really find cinema or were able to watch movies until I was in college.
Wow.
And at that time, it was that translation of, I remember the book that did it for me. It was reading The Godfather by Mario Puzo, and how much it drew me in and how similar it was to my culture, this Italian culture of family, and how it translated to me. And then watching the movie and having this totally internal and external experience of someone else's interpretation of that book. And I thought, oh my God, this is a thing. And ever since then, I was just driven by this idea of, how people say that movies and film are an immediate empathy machine.
Right.
So when someone is, watching it, they're breadcrumbed into the feeling and experience of these characters. And I think somebody who's come in, like me, who's come in from the outside and really wants to be on the inside, for me, language and storytelling was a way to draw people in.
I'm curious about the difference that if you remember, between the book and the experience with the movie, and if you were able to, when you walked out of the theater, if you did any kind of critique, or did they just stand on their own 2 feet and you just marveled that the story worked as a novel and worked as a book? I mean, or did you have an internal dialogue or?
Well, I didn't watch the film when it came out in the theaters. It was VHS. It was
Right.
on a television screen. But for me, it was the sensation at times of deja vu, because it was so similar to what I had imagined. And then at times it was really different. And because of casting, or, I didn't see or experience the character in such a tone. It was tonal. But nonetheless, it was a depiction of family, and I think that the part of it that was the tension between the characters, the family, the conflict that was so prescriptive of what family hierarchy looked like, and that translated into, the mafia. But for me, because as a child, you felt the reverberation of the adults making the very important, decisions and the serious talks, and my family had gone through a lot of, let's just say, a lot of drama and legal things because of the motel and because of us as immigrants. And so there was a lot of misunderstanding and I guess
Subtext between
subtext,
the words
right,
that you're trying to absorb as a kid.
right,
And they don't
and
want
what we're feeling, and,
Right.
and the conflict that's out there, and the fear of the unknown, and not knowing how to control it. And also, I was the first person in my family to really study English. My mom took some English classes where she worked, but really I was the oldest of 3 daughters, and I was the first one in my family to really get a grasp of English, and so I became sort of the translator, and I
Wow.
was translating a lot of legal documents, or
Wow.
I was running the front desk of this motel and talking to adults and negotiating prices, and so it was me engaging with this adult world and trying to translate that to my parents as well.
Were you a teenager or younger when you were doing
Oh,
this?
younger, younger. I think I started around
What?
10, and then yeah, we all just
Had to,
worked as a family business. But
right.
it's but the importance of understanding, having a grasp of the language was paramount
Mm-hmm.
as to who I am, the role that I played in my family, and what I took away from that was that if I could be understood, then people can be on my side, because understanding is a precursor to love and acceptance. So for me, language was the key,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing how to tell a story well and contextualize it for the other person is the key to being understood.
So story's been a big part of your life, but you were also thinking about, I believe you wanted to be a lawyer, or you thought you would go into law. And of course, in law, there's a lot of things. There's performance, there's story, but
And
there's
this
also
interpretation of the
also to the interpretation, the ability to absorb a lot of information and then retell the story the way that you want to present it.
right. So as with a lot of immigrant families and for their children, you understand that the sacrifices they made means that you are either going to become a doctor, a lawyer, or something of the like. I think I was just given
Or
the two.
president.
No, you can't be
Yeah,
president.
president, right.
So that's off the table. So for me, because legal translating legal documents was already part of my repertoire. I think the debate team and being in the America's Legal Association for Young Attorneys, young lawyers was part of what a club that I belonged to and was allowed to belong to. But yeah, to your point, this play with words and understanding and digesting words and understanding how they fit and how to contextualize someone's a subjective narrative, and understanding what the greater purpose is for writing something or for telling a story. That's always been that's a muscle that's been well honed in my life.
So we've been a couple for a decade, married 5 months, but a couple for a decade, which has a nice ring to it. But why don't you tell the audience your first encounter with Alice in Wonderland and what your reaction to the
My
story?
very I would say that Alice in Wonderland came to me again through Disney.
Right.
So the Disney film, watched it maybe, I don't remember, probably when I was 12, 11 or 12. And, it's blonde little girl that falls down the rabbit hole and has a lot of nonsensical events that happen to her. And it tickles everybody to think of, oh, what if I changed in size? What if you're in this dream place where nothing seemed to make sense? And so it kind of frees you up to from logic, and it allows you to be playful. And I remember it getting pretty dark. With with the Queen of Hearts, and then it just was resolved by it all being a dream. I don't think I connected to Alice in that way as much as I did to some other Disney characters, um, because I think this idea of staying a child and not wanting to grow up was not
The opposite
was
of
exactly the
the
opposite
opposite
of
of
what I
what
was conditioned to do.
and the path you were on, because you finished high school early, you went to Duke, you finished Duke early, you wanted to get into your adulthood, into your career, and what ultimately became, writing for television.
Yeah, I think the path of writing for television showed itself down the road, but I think I was always fascinated. I mean, as a kid, I used to live in the library, and I used to go into the research section and look up all the ways that fairy tales evolved
Hmm.
from Europe,
Right.
and in all the different origin tales, origin stories coming from all across different cultures, and how they evolved and how they came into our consciousness. And I was just fascinated with it, and I'm not quite sure why, but I just really was very interested because also in Chinese lore and mythology, a lot of these tales were told to us as cautionary tales. There
Mm-hmm.
were ways that our lessons came to us, and if we as kids didn't do the right thing, then these are the consequences. So it was sort of needed to understand that. I was raised some Buddhist, but also at the times when stories were given to us and that were contextualized. Okay, well, if you tell lies, this is what's going to happen to you. If you
Right.
do this something else bad is going to happen to you. So I think as a kid or as a person, you want to examine like what is the worst thing that can happen to me.
Right. Well, for me, it's the devil
That's right. Yes,
and hell.
that's right. Being burned forever. Um, so, but now looking at the larger lens of stories and and Alyss, I wanted to revisit that because I remember when I first met you and I was learning and reading about the Looking Glass Wars and how you've reimagined Alyss. Um, it was really inspiring because you were empowering a female, a girl, to become a warrior, a queen, and more importantly for me, it was somebody who had to look back and reconcile the history of her past and not just her own past, but her family's past. And that's something that I I recognized within my own past, in my own history.
And this is a motif that you're really, really deeply invested and interested in your past and using it in storytelling. The project that you have set up now is very much the lead character is very much
Yeah, a lot of the impetus for my writing has to do with how we tell our stories, and with that, how it forms our identity, and how in order to move on, and we need to look back and reconcile our past and to contextualize it not just for ourselves, for our for our not ancestors, but our generational traumas that need to be reconciled in order for us to understand how to move on, and to pass that on to our kids, to our daughters and sons. So this story, I think I think humanity as a species, we need story to help us understand and give value and meaning to everything we've gone through outside of our immediate emotional responses.
So, we were a couple for, I think it was 2, 3 years, and you had your focus on the things that you were doing work-wise. I had the things that I was working on. Of course, we talked about the Looking Glass Wars, but we weren't collaborating. We
No.
were
I
as
remember you were diving back into developing the musical.
and we went for a walk in Minnesota
Yes.
around the
Christmas
lake,
Lake.
Christmas Lake, where I
Hmm.
grew up, and I was lamenting this problem with adapting the Looking Glass Wars into a musical, and I was stuck, and I thought I don't know what it is I'm trying to take on shoehorning this novel that I've lived with for all these years into a musical, but I had been inspired by Wicked and I really thought it could work. But as I remember telling you, the character of
Well, you were having a hard
Prince
time
Leopold,
reconciling
Prince
Alice with two love interests.
Well, in that they were separated, and half of the show was with Prince Leopold, and then half of it was back with Dodge. And I said, that's never going to work, and I don't know how to fix it. And so we kept walking, and you didn't say anything for a little bit, and then you just turned and went, well, I think if they're the same character, that would work. And I said, well, what are you talking about? Well, um, Prince Leopold is in fact also Dodge, and Dodge is Prince Leopold. So they'll go back and forth between our world and Wonderland. And I was in love with you before that, but that moment was wow. I think I grabbed your hand and said, I'm not ever going to let go.
I thought that moment happened when I hit that putting, I hit ball into the
Oh, that's
in the hole
true.
in the
That's true.
putting
That's true.
green.
That's true. We went on a little vacation, and it was a golf course, and I showed her. I was showing her. I was trying to teach her how to putt,
Putt.
and I brought you to that green, and it was about a 60-foot downhill breaking putt, and you sank it, and I was that. That's true. Okay.
I think that was the first moment.
Well,
And then the second.
that was the athletic moment, because I live in two spaces. I live in an athletic space, and I live in the creative space, and so that was more of my past coming through, and
No, that was really fun. I do remember the moment that you're talking about around Christmas Lake, when you looked at me with new eyes and thought,
yes.
you and I can collaborate.
Yeah, yeah. And so we have, and it was interesting. We've talked about a lot of different musicals, and you started writing the outline for what they call the book, which is the outline for the composer and the lyricist, and those are tricky to.
It was really fun because there's another aspect of my past or my childhood that Frank didn't know about, and working on this project with him allowed me to really go into and plumb, into this past where I had music in my life. We didn't have a television really, but we had a piano. And we always played and sang, and so musicality was always a part of our family life. And when I was invited in to work on this musical, I really had fun writing
Yes, and you
some
love to
songs and
dance as
lyrics.
well. You're quite the dancer. But what we were kind of trying to sort out was the tone. We were looking at Les Mis as an example
Yep.
for a bit. We were also looking, obviously, Wicked,
Yeah, we were looking
Moulin
at
Rouge.
these great sweeping love stories because ultimately it's a big love story that drives it. But it's also, we wanted to make it fresh, and we want to look at examples of how, you take something that we all know in popular culture, the zeitgeist, and take a left turn with that project. And so it's like reimagining and reinventing something that feels familiar and giving it a twist.
And musically, you had a lot of various songs that for each scene, you'd usually put a song or two that you were familiar with. That was the kind of roadmap of what we were thinking for a future composer, lyricist. And do you recall some of the songs that you thought would capture the best tone of?
I, d- I,
I don't remember. I don't
I
have
don't
it.
remember. I don't have it in front of
Yeah.
me, but there was "Where Is My Song." I think there was one that I wrote was like my song or "Where Is My Song."
Well, you
And
wrote.
"Mother" was another one that was recalling. It was her, yeah, calling out for her mother when she
But
was
you
young.
and you wrote some lyrics. You got inspired and
Yes,
wrote some
I think
lyrics.
it's the "Your Song" or "My Song." I forgot
Yeah.
exactly what it's called. We should look at it and do that one. But yeah, it was really it. I think that if given the time and the space to really do a deep dive, it flows because there's so much material there to draw from.
Yeah, and I think the aspect of being able to establish the reimagining of what happened with Lewis Carroll, but ultimately that this is driven by this love story and her coming back to home and to her destined love.
Right, and
Seem
her finding her sense of identity in all of that.
Yeah, and so so that's been really enjoyable. I mean, one of the challenges that we both have in terms of finding the entry point for the Looking Glass Wars beyond the books and graphic novels is what's the right medium, what's the timing, and what's the best story. Just in the same way that the movie has really limited parameters and time, the musical, you have 20 songs and you have to compress and condense And I've found that to be, very difficult because, maybe I'm too close to this source material. But when we started talking about it as a TV show, and especially the way that streamers are working, where you can have multiple stories, multiple storylines, multiple timelines, it started to show itself as a real exciting avenue.
I really enjoy stories, watching stories now where the characters are tied together and the stories are tied together thematically, not not through chronology or space and time. So the characters don't necessarily have to be in the same space and to share something that's really meaningful. And I love the way that sometimes storylines cut across each other just by maybe there's a pivotal scene or an emotional scene where the emotions itself connects the characters. So we're really able to explore that in the TV show model because of the magic system and the emotionality that ties Hatter and Alice together, and also something that ties Red, Queen Red, who's also Rose, and explores some of the reasons why she became Red in her timeline as a teenager with her sister. So I really want to bring it back and ground it back to the family story.
Right.
I know the scope of the show is huge. It's Wonderland, Wonder Nations. There's a whole Wonderverse out there that you've created over 20 years, and there's so many characters and really cool concepts. But underneath it all, it's a family story. And for me, it's the Hart family. It's what happened, back in the day with the queens and when things got out of balance, and then their ability to wield imagination, how that ripples out to the rest of the world. And for Alyss, it's a redemption story. It's a redemption story for her family and ultimately for herself and in the decision of who she wants to be going forward.
I'm really glad I married you. So bringing it full circle to family, your family, the Godfather, and the Looking Glass Wars, finding that strong theme of family and anchoring it in that is something that I would like to continue to explore with you in these podcasts. We can, if you'd like to come on again, if I've been a good host and you would honor me with another episode, we can continue our conversation, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about what we're doing with the book. What do you think? Will you come back?
Well, it'll depend on what you do tonight. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I have a short list. But yes, of course, I would love to come back and share our process.
All right. Well, it's really nice chat with you across the table, and to expand our collaboration in this way. So
I love it.
all right.
All right, till next time.
Till next time.
Thanks for having me.